of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of Saint Joseph. It is Current Events Wednesday, and our guest today is George Neumayr, senior editor and writer at the American Spectator, Spectator.org, also author of The Biden Deception, Moderate Opportunist, or the Democrats' Crypto-Socialist, The Political Pope, How Pope Francis is Delighting the Liberal Left and Abandoning Conservatives, and No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom. George Neumayr, thank you for being with us today, coming to us from Virginia. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
All right, excellent. And we are looking forward to hearing George's reporting and commentary on various affairs of church and state today. But first, it's important that we always do begin the Current Events Wednesday show by remembering the biggest current event of all and the number one news story that ought to be reported by the networks but is going unreported today and every day, and that is the ongoing daily government-sanctioned, government-funded, government-protected mass murder of innocent children in the wombs of their mothers. Real people being murdered by the thousands every day, and this is going on today in our nation, every day in our nation. It also means the mass exploitation of pregnant moms in need for profit by the lie of abortion. In terms of loss of human life, we're talking about at least a 9/11 every day in the U.S. Imagine 3,000 of any other category of persons being murdered in a given day in our nation, and then it going unreported by the media and even mostly ignored by the churches. And then imagine if that were happening every day and you begin to understand something of this insane reality in which we find ourselves. Again, remember that according to a July 2020 article in the prestigious peer-reviewed medical journal The Lancet, we have a global death toll from abortion of more than 200,000 preborn children being murdered worldwide every day. 200,000 every day. It is essential that we put great effort into breaking through our own desensitization to this massive evil. We have to face reality on this and so much more. We must live, proclaim, and push forward the vision that every innocent human being without exception has a right to life. Even an atheist still ought to have the basic moral sense to see the evil of killing an innocent child. For those who believe in Jesus and His Catholic Church, we have the additional benefit of crystal clear, authoritative, magisterial teaching on this, which truly gives us absolutely no place to hide in treating those in the womb as any less valuable than us. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2270, quote, "Human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception, meaning fertilization. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent human being to life," end of quote. Also, if you've experienced abortion in some way as a mother, father, sibling, grandparent, etc., there are great people, great resources available to help you in your healing process. We love you. You are not alone. You can go to lovewillendchildkilling.com, click on the healing tab there for more information. So George Neumayr, let's tie all of that in with your most recent article at the American Spectator, Spectator.org. In it, you write about Biden's HHS secretary, the notorious radical pro-abort fake Catholic Xavier Becerra. You write the following, you say it in quotes, health in quotes, has become the left's alibi for a secularist tyranny that seeks to control both body and soul. Biden made sure to elect as his HHS secretary an activist, adamantly committed to that vision, in addition to hassling faith-based adoption and foster care agencies. Becerra is planning to force religious hospitals to perform abortions and transgender surgeries Trump set up an office at HHS to prevent it from abusing the religious. Becerra is in effect shutting that office down. George, tell us more about what is going on here.
Well, I argue in that piece that Joe Biden is using the Department of Health and Human Services as the tip on his spear against Christians. That agency, among more than any other agency, is being used to secularize the country and put pressure on Christians to succumb to Biden's version of morality. And Becerra is doing that in a number of ways. He's wiping out all of Trump's protections for the religious. Trump famously undid Obamacare's contraceptive mandate, which freed up groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor. They no longer had to finance the birth control and abortifacients of their employees. So Becerra and Biden are working to restore that contraceptive mandate. They're working to change the definition of equality so that it forces religious hospitals to perform transgender surgeries and abortions. And that came out actually in a legal filing recently that the HHS is working with Planned Parenthood to redefine regulations so as to force the religious hospitals to promote LGBT and abortion, the abortion agenda. So, and I say in the article that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Over the next 3 years, we're going to see innumerable collisions between the Biden administration and Christians.
Yes, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Catholic Church leadership reacts, those who are human beings in the position of sacred offices, which we all are in some sense. As a father and a husband, it's a sacred office I hold as a lay person in that sense. But an even higher sacred office is certainly one who is a successor to the apostles, our bishops. We need them to fulfill the responsibilities of those sacred offices and stand up to Joe Biden, who claims to be a Catholic. And we know he's not living very well like one, according to much of his policies. But you were at the Church Militant Enough is Enough prayer rally and conference in Baltimore back in November during that week where the USCCB was meeting, and you spoke there at that prayer rally. And I want to play a clip of it and get a reaction from you just based on your takeaway of that week. But here's a little slice. I do encourage everybody to go to churchmilitant.com and to listen to this talk by George Neumayr that he gave there. But here is just the end of it to give you a taste. Here it is.
Some observers may find it perplexing that the most pro-abortion administration in American history is led by a Catholic, but it is not. This scandal was a long time coming. Through laxity and heterodoxy, the bishops allowed a class of pro-abortion nominal Catholics to crop up, from Mario Cuomo to Joe Biden, and now we are reaping that grim harvest. And even at this late date, even as Joe Biden takes direct aim at the Little Sisters of the Poor and other Catholics, the bishops still will not take decisive action against him. What makes the pain of Catholic suffering under Biden even worse, even more acute, is the knowledge that his persecution has been facilitated by their own bishops. Thank you.
All right, very well said. George Neumayr at the Church Militant Enough is Enough prayer rally and conference in Baltimore back in November. But George, what is your takeaway? You're on point on this, and the USCCB, those bishops met that week. What was your takeaway on what occurred, what did not occur, as you look back on it?
Well, I mean, it was clear from that rally that the faithful would like to see the bishops take action against all these bad Catholic politicians, but the bishops are clearly unwilling to do that. And the feeble document that they produced at the conference just shows that they're completely unwilling to address this scandal from a canonical point of view. They dodged that issue. They ignored Canon 915 again, which makes it clear that priests have not only a right, but a duty to protect the sacrament of communion against sacrilege and communion. Canon 915 falls on the minister of communion. It says that he's obliged to protect the sacrament from a manifest public sinner. And Joe Biden clearly falls into that category. He's directly facilitating the killing of unborn children. And if that's not a mortal sin, I don't know what is.
Yes, and I want to get more into this as we get into your article a little bit later in the show on the notorious Cardinal Mahoney resurfacing. That was just days before the USCCB, the bishops met there for their fall General Assembly meeting. He asserted himself in a very odd way, which when you juxtapose that to Cardinal Burke's statement, which came out a couple weeks before that, couldn't be more black and white, but it all concerns Canon 915. Really, those obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. That's what it is. So it ought to be faithfully followed, faithfully enforced. And sadly, that's not really where the discussion is among the bishops at this point. George, anything in terms of a positive takeaway that you come away with after that week, besides the clear disappointment or what we saw, the inaction of the bishops? Any positive takeaway that you come away with?
Well, I have to say that, to the extent that I have any confidence in what happened, it comes not from the bishops, but from the laity. It's clear that the laity wants holiness and orthodoxy restored to the church. I just wish that the bishops shared that enthusiasm, and right now it just appears like they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We love you, bishops. We are for you. We are for your eternal salvation as well as your temporal good. But the eternal salvation comes first. Be faithful to your sacred offices. Understand, Canon 915 is crystal clear. Those obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. That's what it is. Either say why you don't have to follow that, or follow it faithfully and show us that example of fidelity. We'll be right back on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I grew up Catholic Church, haven't been in the Catholic Church for decades, but I'm in the process of working my way back for the simple reason that I needed a place to listen to pro-life, pro-family messages. Catholic radio is it. It's a place to hear that message without all the political bias and all that's going on News Talk Radio.
It changed my life.
It's the only station I turn on.
The Catholic station is an answer to prayer.
It couldn't be more fulfilling.
It's helped me learn more about the faith, and it's helped me to deepen my faith as a result of that.
It's on continuously in my house, day and night. You can't imagine how much I receive from that channel.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
The Station of the Cross thanks our financial supporters who have enabled us to broadcast Catholic programs for more than 20 years. As a nonprofit lay organization not affiliated with your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported. Through your generosity, we're able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel message and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments. Thank you for your continued support, and may God bless you and your family.
Howdy, this is Adrian Fonseca, producer of the Catholic Drive Time Morning Show. We're happy to be with you on the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network each weekday morning at 7 a.m. We strive to keep you informed and inspired with insightful guests and a look at the news stories of the day that you need to know. Join us on the Catholic Drive Time Show every weekday morning at 7 a.m. on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio app. That's on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio app. God love you.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. It is Current Events Wednesday, and our guest today, George Neumayr, senior editor and writer at the American Spectator, spectator.org, also author of The Biden Deception, The Political Pope, No Higher Power, Obama's War on Religious Freedom. And George, I want to go to your article from December 7th entitled The Church Caves in the Age of COVID. Where is the Church's defense of religious conscience? You begin by stating this, and I'm going to read a little bit of this, and you say, the Catholic Church has a long and distinguished history of opposing tyranny, but today's hierarchy has shown little interest in upholding that tradition in the age of COVID. From the very beginning of COVID's outbreak, the hierarchy signaled submission to the collectivists and central planners. The bishops immediately closed their churches and kept them closed for a long period of time, even as abortion clinics, tattoo parlors, liquor stores, and the like remained open. In defiance of the First Amendment, many states defined religious activity as non-essential, and most of the bishops accepted that definition as if the Catholic Mass is no more essential than a pop music concert. In some states, nail salons opened before Catholic churches did. It is hard to imagine the pre-Vatican II Church showing such craven deference to an increasingly godless state and its arbitrary definitions of what is and what is not essential. The traditional Catholic impulse during a crisis is not to eliminate public worship of God, but to increase it. Religion is as essential to the soul as food is to the body. The churches should have been as open as supermarkets, but few bishops dared to make such points. Many of the bishops backed up governors as they turned into little dictators during the crisis. So forgive me for reading so much, but it's great writing, and we need to bring that forward for people today. Speak to us a little bit more about this and about this article, such a good one that you have here, George Neumayr.
Sure, yeah. I think the bishops made a very critical error when they went along with the governors and the senators and so forth in defining church activity as non-essential. I think that was their first mistake. They should have objected right then and there and said, church activity, religious activity is essential. It's as essential to the soul as food is to the body, and we're not going to shut our churches. And especially when you're keeping really awful things like abortion clinics open and tattoo parlors and things like that open, we're certainly not going to close our churches when you're keeping those things open. So, but I didn't hear very many bishops make that point. Very few made that point. I think Cardinal Burke, made that point, but almost all of the bishops just sort of went along with this very inaccurate definition of what is essential and what is not essential activity. And I think right then and there they should have taken a stand, but they didn't. And I think we've suffered as a result of that. A lot of these guys, a lot of these bishops, they don't sound like pastors of souls. They sound like managers of department stores. Wilton Gregory, I remember Cardinal Wilton Gregory in Washington, D.C., he said, my first duty is to protect the health of my flock. Well, that's not actually true. His first duty is to protect their souls. And he should have realized that, this is not, COVID-19 was never wasn't the bubonic plague. It was not a 100% fatal disease. It certainly threatened the elderly and some other groups, but it wasn't an overwhelmingly fatal disease. And therefore, the bishops should have shown, I think, more backbone and standing up to the state when it defined church activity as non-essential.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There were certainly other moves to be made than everybody going lockstep into the dark following the government. And, they ought to have had a sense that there was something more at stake here when you're going to allow yourself to be deemed as non-essential and you go along with it, while at the same time the abortion centers remain open and are deemed essential. And, oh, by the way, I didn't hear any bishops speaking out against that, demanding that the abortion centers be closed as non-essential in their states. So they missed a lot of opportunity in that time. Perhaps it was hard to grapple with what was going going on, but it makes me wonder, is it perhaps a consequence of them surrounding themselves with a bureaucracy that has no other ideas, that isn't bringing forward anything that would really be helpful in a time like that? Instead, it's just the lawyers pushing forward, oh, you got to do this, Bishop. Well, okay, I guess I got to do this. So when you see a bishop come into a diocese, especially one that has been notoriously unfaithful, and they don't clean house, that's a problem. They ought to come in like any good football coach would come into their football team. If it's a losing team, you come in and you say, we're going to fire the staff and hire a new staff. You don't usually see that when bishops come in and out. They come in and out and they leave the same old cronies in the bureaucratic system who are most oftentimes these heterodox folks that just continue to filter through and do damage. Any other comment on that, Mr. George Neumayr?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. This whole crisis has shown that the church is not so much changing the world as being changed by the world. And as you were saying, all of the secularist assumptions have been adopted by the church bureaucracy and the bishops. They don't respond to these crises like men of God. They respond like corporate managers. And yeah, they're more worried about, lawsuits and liability than they are about saving souls.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. Further in this article that you have here, by the way, folks can find it at spectator.org. The church caves in the age of COVID. That's the name of the article we're talking about right now. You mention about New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, how he was bragging about his support from the New Jersey bishops. I want to play a clip of when he was doing that on Tucker Carlson's show. So again, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, here it is.
15 congregants at a synagogue in New Jersey were arrested and charged for being in a synagogue together. Now, the Bill of Rights, as you well know, protects Americans' right, enshrines their right to practice their religion as they see fit and to congregate together to assemble peacefully. By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order? How do you have the power to do that?
That's above my pay grade, Tucker. So I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this. We went to first of all, we looked at the data and the science, and it says people have to stay away from each other. That's the best thing we could do to break the back of the curve of this virus that leads to lower hospitalizations and ultimately fatalities.
And I'm not contesting that, though. I think I do think there's a debate. This is a rolling conversation because we're learning new things every day, and nothing is settled at this point.
Understood.
But I do want, since you are an elected official, a leader in the government, an executive, how do you have the authority to order something that so clearly contravenes the Bill of Rights of the United States, the U.S. Constitution? Where do you get the authority to do that?
Well, here's the thing. We know we need to stay away from each other, number one. Number two, we do have broad authority within the state. And number three, we would never do that without coordinating, discussing, and hashing it out with the leaders, the variety of the leaders of the faith in New Jersey. We are among, if not the most diverse state in America, so we're used to that. I'm sure that you talk to every rabbi and priest, but there's a deeper question here, and I'm just going to ask you one last time because I think it's important. I'm sure you've thought about this. You can't just, as the governor of a state, tell people who they can talk to when and where, because the Constitution of the United States, upon which all of this is based, prohibits you from doing that. So you clearly decided that you could do it. Did you consult an attorney about this? Did you? I mean, because this is a legal question as well as a medical one, isn't it? I don't go to the men's room without consulting an attorney, so I guarantee you we did that. But I'll give you an example that was not related to the synagogue. I called up Cardinal Tobin, Cardinal Joe Tobin in Newark. There are 5 or 6 archdioceses in New Jersey. It was coming up to Easter and Holy Week in particular. And I said, listen, I'm really concerned about drive-through Holy Communion, because we had heard some stories about priests who unwittingly had the virus and unwittingly passed it on to parishioners. And he said, we're not doing that, I promise you, and I'll confirm that with my fellow bishops. That's not denying someone their right to worship in any way, that we have to find a different way to worship. And I think that's the point. God bless America.
Yeah, we're not, government's not allowed to tell people how to worship just as a sort of factual one. Last question.
All right, so there's a lot packed in there. Again, that was New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy back on April 15th of 2020 on the Tucker Carlson show, talking about that involvement with Bishop Tobin of New Jersey, and basically using it as a way to say, hey, we can lock up people, we can arrest people if they gather in a synagogue or in a church. In fact, Bishop Tobin says, he's going to listen to what we're doing, and we have his support on this. So look, they're using the church to do things that are not good, in fact, quite bad. And this is just one example of it that you're pointing out here, George, in your article. Anything else that you want to speak to from that clip?
Yeah, well, I think Tucker Carlson was making a good point, which is that our First Amendment rights don't dissolve simply because our leadership is weak. Our religious leadership is weak. Thankfully, our First Amendment rights don't turn on the courage or lack of courage of a Bishop Tobin. So, what his opinion of the matter was is completely irrelevant to whether or not we have a First Amendment right to worship, which of course we do. And that right doesn't simply disappear because those in authority claim that a health crisis exists, which justifies suppressing that right. So I think Tucker Carlson was making a good point there. And unfortunately, what happened in New Jersey, I think happened in a lot of states where weak church leadership jeopardized the First Amendment rights of the faithful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking to George Neumayr, and we're talking specifically right now about his article, The Church Caves in the Age of COVID. You can find it at spectator.org. And you take another step in this article, and this is one that I think is very, very important for people to see, where you say this involvement is not just with the local bishop in this case, but also you go on to say the partnership of Pope Francis with the global left grew even tighter after COVID emerged. Pope Francis eagerly seconded calls for a great reset in the name of COVID. You go on to say that Pope Francis, he tweeted out Joe Biden's slogan, Build Back Better. Never mind that Biden's conception of building back better includes abortion, assaults on the traditional family, and the promotion of transgenderism. And you also point out that this is very much different, very much in direct opposition to popes of the past, of recent past. Pope John Paul II warned about a culture of death, and Pope Benedict XVI deplored the dictatorship of relativism. And you say the Great Reset combines the worst of those two currents. You then follow up by saying, Dr. Anthony Fauci, you quote him saying, you have someone who's a deeply religious person, him talking about Pope Francis here, saying, who will listen to their clergy. And this, by the way, is a Vatican conference that Fauci is speaking at here, I presume from the article. And he says that that's different than me with a suit going into an area telling people to do something. So he's saying here that what the strategy is. Look at Pope Francis. If you don't want to listen to us, listen to Pope Francis. He's telling you to do this thing, so do this thing. Oh yeah, it's the same thing we're telling you to do. And it's just, he's another guy on their sales team, basically. How can we reach this audience that isn't going to listen to us? Well, this audience is going to listen to Pope Francis. Even if they won't listen to us, we can reach them if we co-opt him in this way. And that's precisely what they're doing. And with many of the church leaders, where are the church leaders with backbone pointing this out, speaking otherwise? I don't see them. In fact, they are few and far between. Cardinal Burke, we certainly will recognize him. Bishop Strickland, to a good extent, and maybe another one or two. But we'll be back with George Neumayr and get his comments on the other side. Stay tuned.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live. Mother Miriam is a Catholic nun whose humor, holiness, and years of theological training bless all who are in need of encouragement and practical advice.
Hello, beloved. This is Mother Miriam, and I am thrilled to welcome you to Mother Miriam Live. As always, you're going to be able to call, text, or email whatever your questions are. Through a partnership between the Station of the Cross and LifeSite News, you will be able to listen and watch Mother Miriam Live on Facebook at the Station of the Cross, including past episodes on podcast. God bless you.
Listen on your local Station of the Cross affiliate and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app, or watch the Mother Miriam Live video stream on Facebook by searching the Station of the Cross. Cross. That's Mother Miriam Live each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Baptism. It is the foundation of the Christian life. We become therefore members of the church at baptism. Baptism gives us strength and the right to be Christians and to act as Christians and to take part in Christian worship, the height of which is the Eucharistic celebration.
Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Are you ready to take on the world of flesh and the devil with just the facts? This is Jesse Romero, host of Jesus 911, heard weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined each day by a variety of co-hosts like Ruben Nava, Paul Clay, Dan Schneider, and my amazing wife, Anita Romero. We tackle Catholic devotions, spiritual warfare, family life, saving America, and everything in between. Join us each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Jesus 911. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with George Neumayr today, our guest on this Current Events Wednesday. He is a senior editor and writer at the American Spectator. Spectator.org is where you can find all of his great articles. You can also get his books, author of The Biden Deception, The Political Pope, and No Higher Power. Before the break, George, talking about your article at Spectator.org, The Church Caves in the Age of COVID. Anything else on that article that you'd like to comment on?
Well, yeah, another point I made in the article is that the bishops are really failing to defend religious conscience. You know, you would think that that the bishops would be speaking up in unison in defense of religious conscience during this age of COVID, but they're not. They've really joined the secularists in pressuring people to violate their consciences. And in fact, in some of the dioceses, in New York Archdiocese, for example, Catholics cannot get an exemption, a religious exemption from their pastors. And I think that that's completely contrary to the church's teachings, you know, especially in light of the fact that these vaccines, you know, I know there's a great deal of debate about this, but these vaccines do derive from testing on, at the very least, testing on the stem cell lines of aborted fetuses. So there should be room for religious conscience here for that reason alone. And another thing that strikes me is, why aren't the bishops calling for a vaccine that is completely free of any connection to abortion? I haven't heard any bishops talk about that or demand that the pharmaceutical companies pursue a vaccine that it has no connection whatsoever to abortion. I thought that that was part of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's note during the Pontificate of Benedict. That was one of the points the CDF made, was that, you know, the church should be calling on the pharmaceutical industry to find ethical vaccines. But I haven't heard the bishops talk about that at all during COVID.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, there was some comment early on saying, hey, if you're going to take the vaccine, you at least have to object in some way to the pharmaceutical companies and say that they have to do some sort of an ethical vaccine. That was never followed up on in any sort of significant way at all. It was basically just kind of a caveat that was thrown out there in the beginning to say, okay, yeah, you can go ahead and take the vaccine and you have to do this, but you know what, we'll forget about that real quick. Just, you know, go ahead, take the vaccine, you're good to go. So that was sad to see. And also, though, there are some lay people working in these areas that I want to point out. Children of God for Life, COG4life.org. That's where you can get all the information about the abortion-tainted aspect to these jabs. And certainly, yes, at least in the testing, some also in the production. All the information is there at COG4life.org on those vaccines and other vaccines as well. And also, I believe there's a group, I don't have the website right in front of me, but I believe it's called Taking Recourse, and maybe it's takingrecourse.com or .org, and they're trying to push for an ethical vaccine to be manufactured. So a couple things to keep in mind. We're also going to tackle that topic next Wednesday on the Current Events Show with Dr. Jamie Obst, so tune back in for that. George, you also also have an article here, The Notorious Cardinal Mahony Resurfaces. Very important to take a look at this one because it was right before that USCCB meeting where he popped back up. And I'm just going to read the final line of this. George, sometimes you have some zingers. I usually find at least one in an article. Sometimes it seems you like to end the article with one, and you certainly do a great job doing it here. This is what you say at the end of this article. After all these years, Mahony is still running a protection racket, except for this time it covers Joe Biden. Go ahead and help us to understand why Mahony resurfaced and what that was all about.
Yeah, well, during the pontificate of Benedict XVI, Mahony really disappeared because he was so disgraced by his complicity in the abuse scandal. But then after Pope Francis was elected, he reemerged, and he's undergone a kind of rehabilitation, I think, because, the pontificate of Francis is much more in tune with his liberalism, and the people around Francis, I think, are supportive of Mahony. So emboldened in that way, Mahony recently came out and criticized his fellow bishops for even considering withholding communion from Biden, which of course they didn't even do. I mean, he was sort of pushing on an open door. The bishops never intended to tell, or they were never going to adopt a policy of withholding communion from Biden. So I'm not quite sure why he was so upset with his fellow bishops, but I guess he was upset that they were even discussing the matter, and maybe he was even upset that they were going to ask Biden to refrain voluntarily from communion. But at any rate, Mahony is an important figure to look at because he played a very central role in making sure that canon law was never applied to bad Catholic politicians. In fact, in the late 1980s, when this matter was really kind of being discussed for the first time, Mahony squashed any attempts by pro-life bishops to apply canon law to these bad politicians. Bishop Leo Maher in San Diego, he thought that these pro-abortion Catholic politicians should be excommunicated, and Mahony and Cardinal Bernardine went out of their way to make sure that Maher's position was not heard within the USCCB.
Yes, and on the other
so really,
end,
back when this serpent could have been crushed in its shell in the 80s, it was Mahony and company that made sure that it wasn't crushed. And as a consequence of that, that political class of bad Catholics has just expanded with each passing year, and really Biden is the culmination of that scandal.
Right. Yep, that's right. Yeah, you outline it well in the article, and another person who goes in depth on this in his own personal experience of going through it back in the decades before up until today, and he was trying to point this out to the USCCB, was Cardinal Burke. He wrote a statement on Catholic politicians and non-admittance to Holy Communion back on October 18th. You can find it at cardinalburke.com. Highly recommend it, cardinalburke.com. You can find it there. And one of the things that he was mentioning in that article is that when he was a young bishop and he was applying Canon 915 and he was talking to the bishops about this, they said, "Oh, we're going to get to that. We're going to do something on that." And this is decades now, and still nothing. They kick the can, and now what? I mean, if they're not going to do it now, when you've got the worst pro-abortion politician ever who is claiming to be Catholic as president, pushing for free abortion on demand, taxpayer-funded abortion on demand, as far as you can possibly push, when would they ever do anything? It's going to take new men in those seats of sacred offices who are going to be faithful, or these men have conversions, miraculous conversions, which we certainly pray for, but it's probably going to be down the road where someone new in those offices is going to say, hey, it's about time we start being faithful to this Canon 915, along with many other things as well. But I do want to get to one other article that you wrote here, George. This is an article that is entitled, let me see if I can pull this up here. Yes, there it is. It is entitled, actually, that's not it. This is, Well, I'm losing it. Oh, here we go. The reduction of public schools to propaganda camps. There it is. The reduction of public schools to propaganda camps. The problem is only getting worse. This is an important area to keep an eye on for sure. The indoctrination of our young people through these public government schools. And in this article, you write a bit about what's going on here. Actually, give us a taste of it, and then maybe we can play a clip that you talk about in the article.
It came out that in California, California public schools are recruiting students to join LGBTQ clubs without the knowledge of their parents. And so that came out last fall. And it really illustrates how deep the problem is in these schools, that public schools are not, they're simply, they're propaganda camps, basically. They're being used to indoctrinate children in godless subjectivism. And it just goes to show you that, that the hope for America lies in liberating children from these public schools, because they're so obviously run by propagandists who have no interest in educating children, but simply want to create woke citizens for the fundamentally transformed America to come. And so this gives parents a very urgent reason to homeschool and to put their children in private schools. And so that really was the point of that article.
Yeah, and you talk about this California Teachers Association holding a conference where they're teaching the teachers best practices for subverting parents. And the title of the conference, 2021 LGBTQ plus Issues Conference, Beyond the Binary Identity and Imagining Possibilities. You can only imagine what was going on there. And one workshop focused on so-called queering the middle, where teachers were teaching other teachers how to dupe parents of middle schoolers. And they're saying, hey, we're not official. We don't have any club rosters. We don't keep any records. And then if a parent asks if their kids are coming to our group, we can say, oh, I don't know. Maybe they came. I'm not sure. And we will never get into any trouble for that. And you go on to say, look, separating children from their parents is central to every tyrannical form of government. And then you lean into that famous now, that infamous now quote from Terry McAuliffe that I think cost him big time, where he said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. And then you connect that to the fact that this is now being even doubled down on. This is a clip from Nicole Hannah-Jones, creator of the 1619 Project on Meet the Press, this is just December 26th, seeing McAuliffe lose big in Virginia wasn't enough, I guess, to do away with this idea. They're going to continue to double down and triple down on this. Here is the creator of the 1619 Project saying very similar things. Here it is.
I don't really understand this idea that parents should decide what's being taught. I'm not a professional educator. I don't have a degree in social studies or science. We send our children to school because we want them to be taught by people who have an expertise in the subject area. And that is not my job. When the governor or the candidate said that he didn't think parents should be deciding what's being taught in school, he was panned for that. But that's just the fact. This is why we send our children to school and don't homeschool, because these are the professional educators who have the expertise to teach social studies, to teach history, to teach science, to teach literature.
All right. George, you write that her comment is outrageous on multiple levels. Explain that to us.
Well, I mean, her comment assumes that the so-called experts are doing a good job of educating children, but all of the test data shows that the public schools are academically bankrupt, and it's the homeschooled students, the ones who are taught by their supposedly uneducated parents. They're the ones who are actually testing well on the SAT. They're the ones who are going to good colleges. They're the ones who are not only academically proficient, but also much better behaved than the public school students. So this woman is ignoring the glaring academic and moral defects of the public schools that drove parents to homeschool their children. And we can only hope that movement expands and grows and flourishes, because really it's one of the great hopes for the country avoiding tyranny. The more that kids are stuck in public schools, the more likely it is that citizens are going to be servile and mindless and will not fight against the woke state, but just succumb to it. So I'm hoping that parents will see that the statists are doubling down on their anti-parent attitudes, and I hope they'll use that as an occasion to homeschool or send their children to private schools.
Yeah, certainly hope so. And I do want to actually recommend tuning in tomorrow for folks who are interested in that. We're going to be talking with Katrina Hartsock, who is part of Regina Chaley Academy. We're going to be talking about Catholic education and homeschooling at home and all that is entailed in that formation. And so that certainly seems like a very important option to be taking a look at if you're not already, and figuring out how to even do better if you are already doing so. But this creator of the 1619 Project, she went on in this interview to say that this 1619 Project is being banned by name in various states. And she says, hey, this is going to pave the way for the taking of other political rights, like voting rights, women's reproductive rights, like rights for LGBTQ people. So we're going to have to decide what kind of country we want to be. We can see it's all of a piece here on the left. And I agree, we're going to have to decide what kind of country we want to be. And we ought to have Catholics, faithful Catholics, at the forefront, proclaiming the principles of natural law and forming consciences for real, effective, faithful citizenship. That's what we ought to have. I'm going to open the phone lines. If you want to call with a question or comment, now is the time to do it. 1-877-511-5483. 1-877-511-5483.
Prayer in time of affliction. Blessed, O Lord, be thy name forever. Who has permitted this affliction to come upon us? We cannot escape it, but must of necessity fly to thee to help us and turn it to our good. Lord, we are now in affliction. Our souls are ill at ease, for we are much troubled with this present suffering. Let it please thee, O Lord, to deliver us, for poor wretches that we are. What can we do without thee? Thy mighty hand can do all things. Give us patience, O Lord, and strength and peace. Help us, O God, and we will not fear, no matter how grievously we may be afflicted. O Lord, thy will be done. Welcome be the will of God. Sacred Heart of Jesus, we place our trust in thee. Amen.
There's so much confusion in our world today over what love is. By displaying a Catholic radio bumper magnet on your car, you'll help others understand love as designed by God. Order your free bumper magnets at thestationofthecross.com. We'd be happy to send bumper magnets for your listening area so that others can come to know the Lord. That's thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for sharing Catholic radio on the road. Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today on this Current Events Wednesday, George Neumayr. He is a writer at Spectator.org, the American Spectator. We're going through many of his articles today, very important pieces that we do need to bring this content forward and ponder this, consider it, make it a part of our framework and how we are going to navigate things moving forward. And, there are so many good articles here, George. It's hard to pick which one to go with. We're probably only going to have time for one more. And I do want to get that phone number out one more time. If anybody does want to call in with a question, comment, anything that's been talked about today, feel free to do so. 1-877-511-5483, 1-877-511-5483. But maybe let's go to this article. I think this is one that is so important in our time, just making manifest what is often so unseen, making visible what is often so often invisible. This is called "The Modernist Redesign of Notre Dame Cathedral is a Retreat from France's Heritage. It will become just an extension of the modern zeitgeist." And here we see this sort of battle between traditional faithful Catholic architecture and faithful Catholicism in general versus really this spirit of Vatican II dumbing down of all things. And you write here, according to a recent report, plans are underway to rebuild the interior of the burned cathedral as a politically correct Disneyland, full of contemporary art and politicized murals. Should those plans succeed, the cathedral will tell us less about Christianity's past than its confused present. George, tell us more about this.
Yeah, so the church, in collaboration with the state of France, apparently is going forward. As I understand it, they're going forward with these plans to redecorate the interior of the cathedral in a modernist and PC way. And so I think unless something changes, the Notre Dame Cathedral will be damaged by the modernists. They will have done to traditional architecture what they're doing to the traditional liturgy. They're trying to suppress it and prevent Catholics from having access to the Catholic patrimony, which I see as a very wicked project. I mean, that's the deepest form of division in the church. It's dividing Catholics at the deepest possible level from Catholic tradition itself. And so just as it's important to maintain the traditional liturgy, so too it's important to maintain traditional architecture so that today's Catholics can have access to the glory of our Catholic past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, let's squeeze in actually one more article. This is a piece of good news. You entitle this one, "Are Irreligious Dems Scaring Off Hispanic Voters? They Don't Appear to Care for the Party's Wokeness." Tell us more about this good development.
Yeah, well, this is a rare positive development in that it appears that religious Hispanics are really turning away from the Democratic Party. They're alienated by the party's wokeness and secularism, and those Hispanic evangelicals are it's a rapidly expanding group. It's considered to be one of the most fast expanding religious groups in the country, and so that accounts for what we're now seeing, which is that an increasing number of Hispanics appear to be more Republican than Democrat in terms of their views on not only social issues, but also even on issues related to the economy and immigration. And so what we may see in 2024, the Hispanics vote for the GOP over the Democrats. And as I say in the piece, if Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, that's very likely, it's very likely that the Hispanic voters will break from the Democrats because they are, they're turned off by the party's transgenderism. The blurring of the sexes doesn't appeal to Hispanics. The use of absurd terms like Latinx, that doesn't appear to impress Hispanics. They're turned off by the critical race theory stuff in the Democratic Party. They're not going along with that. So it looks like Hispanics as a bloc, and particularly the evangelical component of it, they want a traditional America, not a woke America.
Yeah, you write here, Biden and Harris are trying to turn America into the very socialist and secularist dystopia that many Hispanics have fled. You go on to say, and you close, I believe, the article with this: forced to choose between Biden's woke America and traditional America, it looks like Hispanic voters increasingly prefer the latter. And that's really what this is about, isn't it? There are two very different visions of America on the table. I'm hoping that the choice will remain so distinct and clear as elections roll around in 2022 and 2024. Do you see that it will be that way? Is that your thought, that there is going to be a very, very clear decision on the table for Americans to make and to say, which America do we want to live in? Is it this woke dystopia, or is it a traditional America? Do you think that the choices will remain in that regard as elections roll around?
I think so, because the Democrats it appears that they have no intention of rethinking their wokeness. I mean, if anything, they're doubling down on it, as we talked about in the previous segment. They're not running away from McAuliffe's comment that parents shouldn't be dictating what their children are taught in schools. They're embracing that comment, and it's the same thing on transgenderism and abortion and defunding, even defunding the police. You still have a number of Democrats who more or less support that. And all these big cities are run by Democratic mayors who are not rethinking any of their woke policies. So I think all of that will translate into improved numbers for the GOP with Hispanic voters. It may not, perhaps it won't reach 50%, but it'll probably get above 40%. And Trump in 2020, he got I think 10 points higher with Hispanics than he did in 2016. And so it looks like the Hispanics actually are not, they're concerned with bread and butter issues. They're not really interested in the boutique causes of the Democratic Party. And I think that's going to show up in the polls next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if the Democrats do move towards the middle a little bit in terms of general election, or in terms of just kind of a veneer to try to fool people to say, hey, we're actually moderates, kind of like what they did with the Trojan horse himself, Joe Biden. You certainly write about that in your book, The Biden Deception. Even if they do that, won't people be smart enough, hopefully, to know that lurking just beneath that veneer is this leftist woke agenda that is disastrous and is only going to rip through like a tidal wave if we let this, this nose under the tent, if we let this camel into the tent, as it were, as the analogy goes, then we're going to have a big problem on our hands. It's already too much in, quite frankly. But any sense that that we're going to have an opportunity to really, I think, win elections where it's going to be the traditional version of this nation, which can bring people all together, united, anti-racism on the right, quite frankly, as well as all of the other things, anti-murdering children, and so much more. Do you think we could reach a point where we win some elections here and we see America unite around traditional principles, natural law principles?
I think so, because, the American people, I think they, especially in moments of crisis, they cleave to the party that displays more common sense. And I think the GOP, for all of its flaws, is the party of common sense right now. And all it has to do, really, all the Republicans have to do, really, is just sort of step back and let the Democrats hang themselves with all of their crazy proposals and wokeness, and because they're in power right now, people can see that they are simply incapable of governing effectively. In fact, they're really not interested in the core functions of government, securing the border and stopping crime and so forth. They're much more interested in these extraneous and frivolous causes like Black Lives Matter and transgenderism and so forth. And so they're the party that's, they always say we're the party that wants to govern, but when they're actually in power, they don't govern, and they fail at the most basic functions of government. Mm-hmm. And so that makes the Republicans look attractive by comparison.
Yes, yeah, always a blessing to have you with us, George Neumayr, and thank you for being here with us. And everybody go check out his work over at spectator.org. If you're not plugged in, plug in over there at the American Spectator. God bless you.
The station of